Get into the big showdown now between Wisconsin and Ohio State. We are joined by Doug Lesmerises, who covers the Buckeyes for the Cleveland Plain Dealer. And Doug, you have to start with the quarterbacks when you're focusing on Ohio State. Let's just, for purposes of discussion here, assume Braxton Miller is good to go. Working under that assumption, how much of a role, if any, would you expect Kenny Guiton to play in this game?
I think Urban Meyer wants to keep Kenny Guiton involved. That's a complicated thing to do when your starting quarterback was the preseason Heisman favorite. But I could envision a scenario where Kenny Guiton gets a series somewhere in the first quarter or somewhere in the game. I mean, I think you need to avoid any type of, quote, quarterback controversy. And if Braxton Miller's healthy, he needs to be your guy. But I do think Urban Meyer feels loyalty to Kenny Guiton, thinks he's a great distributor of the ball to the rest of the guys in the offense. And I think he could find a way to play Kenny Guiton even if Braxton's healthy.
Doug, Ohio State suffers from the high expectations, like most teams that are ranked as high as they are do. How does Urban think the team's doing? Do you get a sense that he thinks they're where they should be? Are they overachieving? Are they underachieving? Because we're all so critical because we expect perfection, but can you get a sense what Urban thinks?
He likes that they've gotten off to good starts. That was a problem last year where they fell behind a lot early on. That has not been an issue this year. I think he sees that as good focus, as good preparation. And then the idea that Braxton Miller hasn't played, that Carlos Hyde played for the first time last week after a 3-game suspension, that Bradley Roby was out for a game. You know, I don't think they've hit their stride yet. So Urban Meyer has tried to emphasize the idea that they are chasing something. They are not on top. They are not the hunted. They still are the hunter. And so he wants to instill that in this team so they don't get a big head about anything, about being undefeated last season. But I do think he likes where this team is, particularly compared to how they started last year.
Doug, where do you see the Ohio State defense this year at this time compared to last year at this time?
It's so different because they have 4 new starters on the defensive line. When you lose guys like Jonathan Hankins and John Simon, things are going to change. I think that defensive line has played pretty well. They didn't have Michael Bennett or Adolphus Washington last week because they were hurt. I think both those guys will play this week. And it's been hard to judge. The competition has not been very good. And, for instance, when they played Cal's up-tempo offense is so different. The Buckeyes played 6 and 7 defensive backs most of that game with only 1 linebacker on the field. It's going to be a very, very different challenge against Wisconsin when they're going to be playing 3 linebackers the whole game. So considering they replaced 6 of the 7 guys up front, I thought they played really well against San Diego State. They have had some tackling issues the past couple weeks, but I still think we have not seen the best of this defense, and I think Urban Meyer knows that too.
Doug Lesmerises from the Cleveland Plain Dealer is with us here. It's BTN Live. Dave Revsine, Chuck Long, and Gerry Dinardo.
Doug, how do you see Jordan Hall and Carlos Hyde playing out this week against Wisconsin?
Jordan Hall is still the guy at running back. The plan in the offseason was for Jordan Hall to play more of the H-back role, the hybrid role, and have Carlos Hyde be the number 1 back. Then the suspension for Carlos Hyde changed that, and Jordan Hall really seized the day. You know, had 30 carries one game. So I think we'll see Carlos Hyde more than we did last week when he had 5 carries. I don't think it'll quite be a timeshare yet. And I think we will start seeing Jordan Hall at that H-back spot on the field at the same time as Carlos Hyde, with Carlos Hyde at tailback. And I think that's when their offense would be the most dangerous. But if the plan originally was for Jordan Hall to be the H-back more often than not, he's still going to get carried at tailback and be that number 1 tailback because he played so well in these first 4 games.
Doug, your key to an Ohio State victory?
I do think Ohio State's going to win this game. I don't think Ohio State has played its best game yet. Because Braxton hasn't been healthy, because Carlos Hyde wasn't there, because the level of competition has been tough to gauge, I don't think we've seen them use Dontre Wilson, the freshman H-back, the way that they really could use him. I think if they wanted to, they could get him 15 touches in this game instead of about 8, and I think that speed would be a game-changing factor, and I think the defense will be good enough. I think Ohio State will win a pretty high-scoring game, but pretty handily.
Okay, so you've made it clear you think that Ohio State's going to win this week. That being said, I mean, there's obviously the possibility they win each of the next 2 weeks, but Wisconsin and Northwestern, 2 big games back to back. Which team is better constructed to beat Ohio State?
You know, it might be Northwestern with that attack because we saw how Cal put up yards and put up some points with a similar spread style. We've also seen Wisconsin in the past sort of run over Ohio State's defense at times with that big offensive line and with those running backs. The question is going to be which defense can slow Ohio State down because you're going to have to outscore them. They've put up a lot of points and a lot of yards. I think both Wisconsin and Northwestern, in their own ways, will score and move the ball on Ohio State's defense. I'm not sure either of those defenses, though, is capable of keeping Ohio State in check enough. So I think maybe Northwestern just because it's at Northwestern, but it's really a test of which defense can keep the offense for those teams in the game.
Well, if recent history is to be our guide, neither team will beat them given the run that Urban Meyer's on. Doug Lesmerises from the Cleveland Plain Dealer. Thanks a lot, Doug.
Thanks, guys.